All right, so get this. Today we're talking about groundwater-dependent ecosystems, or GDEs for short.
Great GDEs, yeah.
And we've got a really interesting study here from Nature. It's called Groundwater-Dependent Ecosystem Map Exposes Global Dryland Protection Needs. And well, it sounds a little dry, but it's actually really fascinating. It's all about these sort of hidden worlds, these ecosystems that rely on groundwater.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it, hidden worlds, because they really are. And they're so important to these GDEs. It's not just about the water, though obviously that's crucial, but they're these incredible havens for biodiversity, places where plants and animals can thrive even in the middle of these really dry landscapes.
Right, like little oases, but underground, kind of.
Exactly. Exactly. They're also, increasingly important as refuges from climate change because those underground water sources can be a bit more stable. Plus, they actually play a really big role in supporting human life, especially in those dryland areas where water is so scarce.
So they're like these unsung heroes propping up all this life that we might not even be aware of.
Exactly. And this study, it really drives that point home, especially with this incredible new map they've created.
Okay, so tell me about this map. It sounds like it was no small feat to actually find these underground ecosystems. How do you even go about doing that?
You're telling me. It's been a huge challenge for scientists to map these things out. But this study, they use this really cutting-edge technology called random forest machine learning.
Random forest. Okay, that sounds a little,
I know, right? It sounds like something out of a Tolkien novel. But basically, it's a super powerful algorithm. And what they did was they fed it tons of satellite data stuff like vegetation health, how much plant life there is, temperatures, rainfall patterns, all sorts of climate data. And this algorithm is able to sift through all that information and spot patterns. Specifically, it was looking for areas that had like way more water and plant life than you'd expect given the surrounding environment, especially during dry periods.
So like little pockets of green in the middle of the desert showing up on the satellite data.
Yeah, exactly. The study calls them blue or green islands. And they say these are like the fingerprints of GDEs.
Wow, that's incredible. Like Netflix recommendations, but for ecosystems.
That's a great way to put it. And the crazy thing is, this map is incredibly detailed. We're talking about a resolution of about 30 meters, which is, let me think, about the size of a baseball diamond, Rob.
A baseball diamond, wow. So not quite Google Street View for GDEs, but still.
Exactly. I mean, for a global map, that's unheard of. And the results were pretty amazing. Turns out GDEs are way more widespread than we thought. They actually cover more than a third of the world's drylands.
A third? Wow, that's a lot more hidden life than I think any of us realized. But I'm guessing it's not all, like, evenly distributed across the globe, is it?
You are so right. There's a really interesting global pattern here. So, for example, in places like Central Asia and also the Sahel region of Africa, the GDEs, they're kind of like these vast interconnected networks. Whereas in other areas like North America and Australia, they tend to be a lot more fragmented, like little isolated pockets.
Oh, wow. So what's going on there? Why the difference?
Well, it turns out that human activity actually plays a huge role in shaping those patterns.
Really? That's kind of mind-blowing. Tell me more.
So take, for example, pastoralism. These are traditional herding communities who have been living in these landscapes for centuries, moving their livestock around in these careful rotations.
Yeah.
And what they found is that in a lot of these pastoral regions, the GDEs, they're actually doing really well. They're more extensive. They're more connected. It's like they've figured out a way to sustainably coexist with these ecosystems.
Wow, that's amazing. So it's almost like they're the original conservationists, these pastoralists.
Exactly. They have so much knowledge to offer, and this study really highlights that. But then on the flip side, you have areas that are dominated by things like intensive agriculture, especially those that rely heavily on irrigation. And unsurprisingly, these are the areas where we see the most depleted groundwater resources and the most fragmented, most vulnerable GDEs.
So it's like two very different approaches and two very different outcomes for these ecosystems.
Exactly. And it really underscores how important it is to manage these resources carefully, especially with climate change adding even more pressure.
Climate change, yeah. I was just thinking about that. What does this all mean for the future of GDEs, especially with a changing climate? Because things aren't looking too rosy, are they?
You're right. And unfortunately, the study does paint a pretty sobering picture. They found that over half of the mapped GDEs are located in regions where groundwater storage is already in decline.
Oh, wow. That's pretty alarming. Are there any regions that are particularly at risk?
Yeah, unfortunately. It seems that some of the most developed areas like Europe, Asia, and North America are facing the biggest threats. Over 65% of their GDEs are in danger. And it's not just about the plants and animals. Remember, we talk about how these ecosystems are linked to human communities.
Right, right. Especially in those drier parts of the world.
Exactly.
Right.
And one region that really stands out in this regard is the Sahel in Africa.
The Sahel, yeah. That's an area that's already facing so many challenges. Conflict, food insecurity, climate change. It sounds like a perfect storm brewing.
Yeah, it really is. And the Sahel is a powerful example of how GDEs are intertwined with all these other issues, because this region is so reliant on these ecosystems, especially pastoralist communities who depend on them for water and grazing. But here's the catch. That very dependence makes them incredibly vulnerable when those ecosystems are stressed, whether it's from drought or overuse. It's like this vicious cycle.
So it's not just about protecting biodiversity, it's about human lives and livelihoods and stability as well. The stakes are incredibly high.
Absolutely. And, it'd be easy to get discouraged by all of this. But the good news is that this study isn't just about sounding the alarm bells. It's about offering solutions.
Okay, that's good to hear. So what can be done? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, well, first of all, just having this map, this global GDE map, it's a game changer. It's like we've been stumbling around in the dark and suddenly someone just flipped on the lights. We can finally see these ecosystems, understand their true extent and their importance.
Right, it's like our treasure map. But finding the treasure is only half the battle, right? We need to protect it too. So what's the plan? How do we actually use this information to safeguard GDEs?
Exactly. The map is just the first step. And, a big part of it is incorporating this knowledge into water management policies. Because you'd be surprised, a lot of policies that are considered sustainable, they don't actually take GDEs into account nearly enough. They're focused on things like, say, safe yield, which is basically making sure we don't extract groundwater faster than it can be replenished.
Right. Sounds reasonable enough. Don't empty the well, so to speak.
Exactly. But the thing is, GDEs, they can be a lot more sensitive to changes in groundwater levels than we realized. Even small fluctuations can have big impacts. So what we need is a more holistic approach, something that takes those ecological needs into account right from the start.
So it's not just about using less water, it's about using it smarter.
Exactly. And thinking about it, not just in terms of human needs, but in terms of what these ecosystems need to thrive as well.
Are there any examples out there of places that are, like, getting it right, where GDEs are actually being incorporated into water management?
Yeah, definitely. It's still early days, but there are some really promising examples. So Australia, for instance, they have something called the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act, and that explicitly takes GDEs into account.
Okay, good on you, mates. Any others?
Yeah. California, too, they've got the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, which requires local agencies to actually consider GDEs in their sustainability plans.
All right, California, leading the way, as always.
Right. So there are definitely models out there that we can learn from. And, it's not just about these big national level policies either. Local communities, they have a huge role to play as well, especially in places like the Sahel.
Right, because they're the ones who are living with these ecosystems every day.
Exactly. And they often have this incredible wealth of traditional knowledge, passed down through generations about how to manage these resources sustainably. Like, remember those pastoralist communities we talk about? They've been doing this for centuries, often without even realizing that they're managing GDEs.
It's like they're the original GDE stewards.
Exactly. And their insights, they can be so valuable, both for developing more effective monitoring programs, identifying potential threats early on, and even for actually implementing management practices, things that have stood the test of time.
So it's about bridging that gap between traditional knowledge and modern science, right? Bringing those two worlds together.
That's it, exactly. It's about scientists and policymakers actually listening to the people who live closest to the land, understanding their perspectives and their needs. Because ultimately, it's about recognizing that we're all in this together. Healthy ecosystems mean healthy communities.
It's not just about protecting nature for nature's sake. It's about protecting ourselves, too.
You got it. It's about recognizing that interconnectedness. And, it's not just an environmental issue either. It's a social justice issue, an economic issue, even a human rights issue. When we invest in protecting these water sources, we're investing in a more sustainable and equitable future for everyone.
Absolutely. Well said. Now, we've talked about policy changes, community involvement, tapping into traditional knowledge. It seems like tackling a challenge this big really requires a global effort, right? Are there any, like, international initiatives focused on GDEs?
You're absolutely right, because these ecosystems, they don't stop at national borders. And yeah, there are some promising initiatives out there. So for instance, the International Association of Hydrogeologists, they actually have a whole working group specifically focused on GDEs.
Oh, wow, I had no idea.
Right. And then there's the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands, which is increasingly focusing on the importance of groundwater-dependent ecosystems as well.
That's good to hear, that there are at least some international efforts starting to take shape. It does feel like the world is finally, starting to wake up to the importance of these hidden ecosystems, but going from awareness to actual action, that's always the tricky part,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, that's where the rubber meets the road.
So what do you think, what's the biggest hurdle we need to overcome to really, truly safeguard these GDEs, these silent heroes?
Hmm. That's a tough one. There are so many factors at play. I guess if I had to pick one, I'd say it's that old out of sight, out of mind problem.
Yeah, makes sense.
Because they're hidden underground, it's easy to forget about them. They don't always get the attention they deserve in those big conversations about water or land use or climate change.
It's like we need to give them a voice, right?
Hmm.
Because if GDEs could talk, I bet they'd have some incredible stories to tell. Stories about like ancient aquifers and unique species that have adapted to these really extreme conditions and, maybe even a plea or two for us to take better care of them.
Absolutely. I love that imagery. GDEs whispering their stories, urging us to listen, to understand their delicate balance.
Mhm.
Because at the end of the day, their fate is our fate too.
That's a really powerful thought. And it brings us back to that idea of interconnectedness, right? Everything above ground, below ground, it's all connected. Well, this has been an incredible deep dive. We've learned so much about these fascinating, vital, and often overlooked ecosystems, from their role in supporting biodiversity to the very real threats they face, and hopefully some of the ways we can work together to protect them.
It really has been a fascinating journey, and I'm so glad we could explore it together. And, even though our deep dive is coming to an end, I hope this is just the beginning of the conversation for everyone listening.
I second that. This is definitely one of those topics that stays with you. So, to everyone listening, keep those GDEs in mind. Every drop of water we use, every choice we make, it all has an impact, even on those hidden worlds beneath our feet.
So well said.
And with that, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for exploring with us, and we'll catch you next time.